So basically, these three 22-year-old dropout dudes somehow built an AI company called Mercor that just got valued at over $10 billion after their latest funding round. Which is just madness. That's almost 20 times their claimed $500 million ARR, which might not even be real. And now Forbes is calling them the youngest self-made billionaires, even though tons of people say the company is a bit shady and probably not even profitable. Mercor's whole business model is basically connect human workers to LLMs like GPT so they can help train and review AI. Kind of like if LinkedIn and data labeling had a weird baby. But the way they operate is sketchy. People say they post fake job listings, all the communication is weird, interviews are done by AI bots instead of real managers, and nobody stays longer than a few months. Now, this insane valuation literally matches the hype-filled AI bubble we're in. Like, how is this not a bubble? And there are tons of startups like this with crazy valuations. Cluely, Adept, Retell AI, Instantly, Crosby, the list goes on. Everyone claims they're building an AI startup, and it's stupidly easy to get VC investors now. Just slap AI on your pitch deck, throw in a few buzzwords, and boom, they're interested. They don't care if the product actually solves a real problem. You even have a real product. They just want to bet on the future. Their whole vibe is basically, I don't know what this does, but take my money. Because of all this speculation, prices and valuations keep going up. To me, that's a bubble. It's almost like stock prices increase because of speculation, not equal prices of goods increasing because of real demand. Not the same thing at all. And the whole ecosystem is stacked like a tower. Take Mercor. Their entire business depends on other AI labs needing humans to train their models. If those labs slow down, run out of money, or shift strategy, Mercor collapses instantly. And a ton of startups work the same way. Their survival depends on another startup surviving, which depends on another one surviving, all the way down the chain. When you trace it back, the foundation of almost the entire AI startup chain sits on a few massive players: OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, Perplexity, and Nvidia. If anything cracks at that level, funding cuts, regulation, slowdown, whatever, a huge chunk of the smaller companies sitting on top will fall like dominoes. That's why people call it a bubble. Valuations are through the roof, profits are questionable, and everyone's betting on a future that might not play out the way they expect. And forget the tiny startups. If this AI bubble ever really bursts, it's not just some random founders losing their funding. We've got huge players whose entire empires could crash if everything suddenly corrects. That's the scary part. In a recent interview at the 2025 US Saudi Investment Forum, an interviewer directly asked Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang,
"Are we going to have an AI bubble?"
That's the last question. All right, all right, let me just tell you what we see. Okay, so I think it's really important when you look at what's happening around the world and go back to first principles of what's happening in computer science and computing. There are three things that's happening. The first thing is that we all know that Moore's law has run its course, and the amount of demand for computing versus the amount of computation we can get out of general purpose computing is really challenging. And so the world's been moving to accelerated computing for some time. We've been pushing this now for over 20 years. Let me give you one statistic. I was just at supercomputing. In fact, what is left over to fuel that revolutionary agentic AI is not only substantially less than you thought, and all of it justified.
And he said a whole bunch of nothing. He couldn't say yes or no about whether it's a bubble. That's why people who argue AI isn't a bubble always point to Nvidia to counter the bubble idea. Their logic is basically, if this is a bubble, then why are Nvidia GPU prices still going up? Why is the demand insane? Companies are literally fighting for chips. That can't just be hype. And yeah, they're not wrong. Demand for Nvidia chips massively outstrips supply, and everyone expects that demand to stay crazy even as Nvidia ramps up production. From their perspective, this isn't fake hype. Real companies are spending real money because they need the hardware today, not someday in the future. But here's my bubble argument. Just because the inputs, GPUs, are in high demand, doesn't mean the whole industry built on top of them is actually sustainable. GPUs are the classic picks and shovels in a gold rush. In every gold rush, the people selling shovels get rich, even if most of the miners end up broke. So it's like this. Nvidia sells the shovels, Oracle and the cloud providers build the rails, OpenAI, Anthropic, xAI dig the quarry. And they all hype each other up to keep people running into the mines. But nobody has actually struck gold yet. Meanwhile, while OpenAI, xAI, Anthropic, and Perplexity are out here digging for gold and burning insane amounts of cash, the guys in the background, the ones who actually power all these flashy AI apps, are the ones becoming billionaires. The real winners aren't the chatbot companies. It's the people building the physical backbone of AI. The data centers, the chips, the power, and the land that keeps everything running. CoreWeave is the best example. They run 30 plus data centers and rent out over 250,000 GPUs. Their founders are billionaires now.
Being the AI hyperscaler means we power some of the world's leading AI labs and AI enterprises, the organizations that together with us are shaping the future of AI.
Nebius has massive data centers across the US and Europe, and even landed a $19 billion deal with Microsoft. Astera Labs, Grok, making AI-optimized chips, and Snowflake, selling cloud data pipelines for training models, are all minting money. Even crypto-linked companies like Cypher Mining are making a comeback because AI data centers need insane amounts of power. AI's new billionaires aren't writing code. They're the ones powering the whole ecosystem. It's definitely not like the old web bubble where every random website got funding. With AI, if the company actually building the AI solution makes money, then yeah, it can sustain itself. If not, it's basically screwed. The way I see it, a lot of these AI startups are acting like they're separate companies, but in reality, they're just tiny departments inside one giant mega company, the AI ecosystem. And as long as the final product at the top is profitable, the whole structure survives. But here's the problem. Around 95% of these AI startups can't find a real use case that actually makes money. And even the ones that do find something useful, there's almost zero chance it's worth trillions of dollars. For example, the most valuable AI company, OpenAI, is worth around $500 billion and generates about $12 billion in revenue. But that is not profit. The company burns far more than that every year. Oracle has committed $300 billion over 5 years to build AI infrastructure for OpenAI. The contract reportedly requires $60 billion annually starting in 2027. This means OpenAI would need to grow its revenue 5-fold in just 2 years merely to pay a single vendor. Meanwhile, Oracle's free cash flow turned negative by $10 billion last quarter, and Barclays has warned that Oracle's cash could be exhausted by November 2026. Training and running these massive AI models is insanely expensive, requiring enormous compute, power, and cooling. But here's the part that should truly terrify you. Nvidia invests in OpenAI. OpenAI uses that money to buy Nvidia chips through Oracle. Oracle uses the payments to service its debt and buy more Nvidia chips. The revenue flows straight back to Nvidia. The serpent is eating its own tail. At the center of this sits SoftBank, with $113 billion in commitments, but only $58.5 billion in actual funding capacity, leaving a $54.5 billion gap that must be filled somehow. Meanwhile, reality looks far less optimistic. MIT found that 95% of organizations see zero return on investment from generative AI. McKinsey reports that 8 out of 10 companies see no measurable bottom-line impact. Look, the big difference between the dot-com era and today's AI boom is pretty simple. Back then, one web server could run something like Gmail and handle tens of thousands of users almost for free. Once the site was built, every new user basically costs nothing. But AI isn't like that at all. Every single prompt costs money. AI literally sucks up cash. Even someone like me, paying $200 a month for ChatGPT, still costs them more than that on the back end. So the real question is, how long will investors keep throwing money at this? Especially when most of these top-layer AI companies, like Character AI, Cursor, Windsurf, are basically building on top of giants. And just like Facebook and Google wiped out smaller players back in the day, the same thing will happen here. The big ones will either crush them or absorb them.
There's like five tiers, right? Like at the base level, you have like electricity and data centers and land, like things like that. Tier 2 are like TSMC, ASML, Samsung, Intel, right? Fabs, Nvidia, AMD, OpenAI, Anthropic, and then on top you have like completely worthless things like Cursor and Windsurf. These Character AI, all these people who think, oh, we're the app, we're gonna get the ARR. No, that worked at the web, won't work at the AI, and I can go into why, but it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
So OpenAI, Anthropic will eat all the value from the cursors and the windsurfs of the world. They'll acquire some of them. They'll compete with some of them, right? Same as you saw on the web.
Here's how Sam Altman and the AI boys convince investors to keep pouring billions in. Just one more data center. Trust us. The dream is huge. AGI, robo-employees, trillion-dollar industries, whatever sounds futuristic enough. Investors tell themselves the margins will magically improve someday. Cheaper GPUs, custom chips, optimized models, blah, blah. But here's the thing. A 1 gigawatt AI data center costs around $80 billion to build and operate. Big tech is planning hundreds of them. So 100 gigawatts means 100 times $80 billion equals $8 trillion in AI infrastructure. For context, $8 trillion is more money than the entire semiconductor industry has made in its entire lifetime. Now comes the nightmare math. You'd need $800 billion in profit every year just to pay the interest on that $8 trillion. No tech company on Earth earns anywhere close. Not Apple, not Microsoft, not Google. And it gets worse. AI data centers don't last decades. They last maybe 5 years before the chips are obsolete. Meaning, we'd be rebuilding the same $8 trillion machine every half decade. And what's the business model to support that? Nobody actually knows. AI still hasn't proven it can generate enough real economic value to justify these trillions. This is the most capital-intensive tech boom in history. The real question is, will AI ever generate enough value to justify an $8 trillion rebuild every 5 years? If yes, AI becomes the most profitable technology ever created. If no, we might be building the biggest financial bubble since the railroads.